This is my Six Sigma final report for Dr. Joyner's 575 class. So for my Six Sigma project, I chose to increase my utilized vocabulary. And this is a project and a goal that I've had for a long time, especially since I had started learning a new language. I realized that the better you know the vocabulary, the more you can use that language and the more it can work for you. And so with this, I wanted to increase the vocabulary I use day to day, which is different than the vocabulary I use while I'm reading. And I realized whenever I tried to improve this before, that I would overload myself and get discouraged after trying to memorize tons of words. And so the reasons why I want to improve this is, one, to build confidence in my abilities with English and to feel more comfortable expressing my ideas. And then also having a more diverse word choice or options. And so my goals for this Six Sigma project was to learn 15 new words each week for a total of 160 new words between the two implementation periods. And my focus was to actually use my new vocabulary. So learn 3 words for 5 days a week, and then use those new words the same day I learned them, and review words from previous weeks, and to keep a vocab journal. And so my quantitative measurements or metrics that I chose to keep track of during this project were, number 1, the words memorized per day. And I collect this off a word list. And then number 2 was the words used per day. And I collected this through a logbook. And then number 3 was if I wrote down in my vocab journal. And I would just number the number of entries that I had in my journal. So the reason why I chose these 3 metrics is because, number 1, I needed to memorize words to start my project. Number 2 was, in order to reach my focus, I had to use my words to integrate them into my vocab. And then I wanted to keep track of how I was using them, what I was thinking about the whole process through my vocab journal. And together, all of these could be integrated into increasing my utilized vocabulary. And so this is a measure sheet, check sheet that I used for the measure phase. And I used one similar for the analyze and improve phase as well. And so I also used a U-chart. And so this is the U-chart key. I used a U-chart because I was trying to keep track of defects, and each day had a different amount of defects. And so on the right, you can see a table that I kept track of words I learned, which was 3, words I used, which was 3, and then if I wrote in my journal, which was 1, with a total of 7 defects. And on Sunday through Tuesday, and Thursday and Friday, it was 7 defects for that day. But Wednesday and Saturday, because they were review days, only had 1 defect possible. So this is the U-chart for the measure phase. There were defects on the y-axis, days on the x-axis. As you can see, it's kind of rocky at the beginning. Whenever it's close to 1, it means that I failed 7 out of 7, or had 7 out of 7 defects. When it was closer to 0, it means that I completed my tasks for that day. And so I created a Pareto chart to see what caused a failure at the beginning. And there's frequency on the left, cumulative percentage on the right, and the categories on the bottom. The biggest problems I had was not journaling, not using my words, and not memorizing. And a few times I had problems with not using GRE words. But to see where all these problems were coming from, I created a fishbone diagram, or process flow. As you can see in the center are all the steps in red that lead to my goal. And all of the things coming off of it are things that need to happen in order for me to complete those steps to lead to completing my goal. And so I realized from the Pareto chart that there were 3 things I could improve on, and I circled these in red. So writing in my journal, making a good word list, and using my words. So with this, my areas of improvement were those 3. Not journaling. The improvement I made was keeping my journal by my bed, so I'd always remember it. Number 2 thing was not memorizing my words. And my improvement was to write my words on note cards. And that way they were a lot more visible and more easily accessible than the notebook I had been using previously. And number 3 was not using my words. And likewise, by keeping them on note cards, they were more accessible, and I could keep them with me throughout the day. And then I would also write how I used my word on the back of the note card. And that way it was more accessible. I would remember to use my word, and then I could keep track easily of how I used my word. So this is a U-chart for the improve phase data. And as you can see from the very beginning, it was pretty smooth. And then as I had a few major assignments from other classes, I had quite a few defects. And that last spike is Thanksgiving. And so I created a Pareto chart to compare between the 2. And so this is a Pareto chart of the analyze and improve phase. As you can see, the same groups as the measure phase, but they've improved. Instead of 12 times not journaling, I had 6 times not journaling. And the non-GRE word category is completely gone on this phase. And so I did make improvements, and that was comforting to know. However, I realized that there was a week or 2 between the end of my analyze and improve phase and this final project due date. And so I decided to implement 2 other improvements for those couple weeks and tack those on to the analyze and improve phase data as the complete analyze and improve phase data. So those 2 improvements are number 1, setting a morning and afternoon alarm on my phone to remind me to study my words so I don't get sidetracked. And number 2 was to keep my note cards in my backpack so I wouldn't forget to grab my word list for the day. And so this is the U-chart for the complete analyze and improve phase. And as you can see, there's an extra week where I did really well. So this is a comparison of the U-charts. This is a comparison of the U-charts between the 2 phases, measure phase and complete analyze and improve phase. And these 2 phases, or this data, will be what I'll be comparing next. So what I did to compare is I used hypothesis testing. I compared each phase individually to the goal. And I had 3 categories that I compared. So number 1 was the words learned with the goal of 3, the words used with a goal of 3, and journal writing with a goal of 1. And I used alpha of 0.05. I used a one-tail test because my results would not be above my goal. And then I used a t-distribution because I didn't have enough data to use a population. I didn't have my population distribution. My null hypothesis was that the category results would not be statistically different from the goal. The alternate hypothesis was that the category result was statistically different from the goal. And so, for the words learned category, my measure phase was 2.35 words per day, degrees of freedom of 19, and I rejected my null hypothesis. For the complete, analyze, and improve phase, my average was 2.57 words per day, degrees of freedom 29, and I failed to reject my null hypothesis. So the complete, analyze, and improve phase was similar to the goal. For the words used, the goal of 3, my measure phase was 1.9 words per day, degrees of freedom 19, and I rejected the null hypothesis. My complete, analyze, and improve phase was 2.53 words per day, degrees of freedom 29, and I failed to reject my null hypothesis. It was too close to the goal. And then my journal writing goal, my measure phase was an average of 0.42, with a goal of 1, and the degrees of freedom was 27. I rejected the null hypothesis. The complete, analyze, and improve phase, the average was 0.86 times per day, degrees of freedom 41, and I failed to reject my null hypothesis. So the comparison next was a comparison between the measure phase and the complete, analyze, and improve phase. And so with this, I compared between the two. I used alpha at 0.05. I used a two-tail test, and I used a t-distribution. My null hypothesis was that the measure phase and the complete, analyze, and improve phase are not statistically different. And my alternate hypothesis was that the measure phase and complete, analyze, and improve phase are statistically different. So for this, I created a composite score for each phase, and the goal was 1. And so for the measure phase, it was 0.66. For the complete, analyze, and improve phase, it was 0.85. And after running my hypothesis test, I rejected the null hypothesis that they were statistically different. So the last step that I had to see if I reached my goals was to have a randomized vocabulary quiz. And this was due to talking to Dr. Joyner and realizing that I could meet all of my tasks, but that doesn't mean or equate to having increased my vocabulary. And so this quiz would give me a little bit of an idea of if I had increased my vocabulary. And so I randomly picked 40 words, and the goal was to use each word correctly in a sentence. My goal was to use 34 words out of the 40 correctly. And the result was I got a 34 out of 40, which was 85%, which I was very happy with. So in conclusion, I completed the Six Sigma phases. My results from that Six Sigma project was number 1, the complete, analyze, and improve phase is not statistically different from the category goals, which means that statistically, the result that I had for each category and the goal are similar enough to not be statistically different. Number 2, complete analyze and improve phase is statistically different from the measure phase, meaning that there was a difference. The improvements that I made a difference, and the data shows that. The number 3 result was that I did not meet my goal of memorizing 160 new words over the semester. This was due to some of those spikes you saw on the U charts that I didn't memorize all of my words. However, number 4 result, I met my goal on my vocabulary list, 34 words out of 40. So I was quite proud with the results that I had from this Six Sigma project. The lessons I learned was number 1, how to use the entire Six Sigma project or process, because I hadn't done that from start to finish before. Number 2 was to see the real-life application for statistical process control tools, and to realize I could use it for more than just my career, but actually personal life goals. And number 3 I learned was having a list of words to memorize is not the best approach for me to increase my vocabulary. And so with that, my future work, because I don't want to end with just this project, my improvements for the next year are to continue increasing my vocabulary by memorizing 1 new word a day, Sunday through Friday, and use the new word the same day I learn it. Review all 6 words from each week on Saturday, and write nightly in my vocab journal. So in regards to picking new words, I want to pick words that are applicable to my needs. The GRE list was a great starting point, but I realized that not all the lists on the GRE list are applicable to my needs. Number 2 in regards to picking words was to make it interesting. I realized, to me, the words that I memorized the best were the ones that I knew the etymology to, the history behind it, how it got into the English language. An example would be pariah, which means outcast or lowest caste. And it was a Tamil word that meant drummer, because drummers were the lowest caste, and they were outcast from society in general. And the English got a hold of it and integrated it into the English language, and that's where you get pariah as outcast. And so I would like to make an effort to learn the history or etymology behind, or origin behind, each of the words I learn, because then I can integrate them better and remember them better. And then the last thing is to use these skills to help me reach other goals and not just stop with vocabulary, but to progress other personal goals using these skills. Thank you for your time. I'm open to suggestions.